well, for ages before Holly came and, like, sort of addressed our gender balance. So, like, for ages you had two men and a woman, and it was like the stereotypical thing that the woman was the nice one. And Sharon was, and every now and then she's reticent to, like, be too mean about maybe is anything like that. But every now and then something comes along that really gets up Sharon's nose, and all that sort of ire that she has saved up that she hasn't used in all these other films gets directed at this one film's Rambo Last Blood. We're looking at you. And now we have found somebody to have some, to keep Rambo some company on that shelf, and this is Persuasion. Sharon, I'll wound you up. The floor is yours. Go. Let us know what you think.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Where do I start? Right. Let me just give my credentials.
Yes.
I am an admirer of Jane Austen's work, and I have enjoyed many of the film adaptations. So in some ways, I don't regard myself as being a purist. I mean, that sounds like I'm almost like trying to defend my position later on, but I don't regard myself as a purist. So I'm happy that, because Jane Austen spoke about the human condition, she understood the human condition. So I think her books are prime for adapting, for modernizing, for inspiring other things. Bridget Jones's Diary wouldn't exist without Pride and Prejudice. Clueless wouldn't exist without Emma.
Yeah.
So there is scope to take that work and then to think, yeah, this underlying all of these issues, it's very modern. And then you get something like Persuasion that comes along that is utter drivel. That they have no understanding of the work. They have no appreciation of the tone, the feel, the themes, the dynamic, they have no clue, basically, what they have read. They have, I would describe it as the panto version of Persuasion, but panto can be entertaining. There was nothing entertaining about this film. I got exactly 1 minute, 58 seconds. I paused it to time it before I went to the what have I just seen? 1 minute, 58 seconds. And I'll tell you now, the next however minutes they were, I felt every single one of those minutes. I felt them in my core that I was watching something that was almost diabolical in its creation, its execution, and its performance. Let me go into details, but without bombarding you. Basically, I went so far as to finding my hardback version of Persuasion.
Yep.
And Anne Elliot, who is the heroine of Persuasion, is described literally in the beginning of the book as someone of great character and of elegance of mind and sweetness of character. Now, someone described because of their elegance of mind does not lie on their bed in the middle of the day stroking a rabbit drinking red wine straight out of a bottle in the first 2 minutes of the film. So she's been infantilized because she's obsessed by a rabbit. She's self-pitying because she's moping around 7 years after the end of this pivotal moment in her life, apparently, because someone, she's now an ex. And I quote the film. And she's drowning her sorrows because obviously she's got nothing else to do but lie on her bed and drink straight from the bottle of wine. And the person who persuaded her to do all this is Lady Russell, who is again described in the book as being of a steady age and character. So not necessarily the sort of person who would go on foreign holidays just to have easy casual sex. You wouldn't think, would you? But that's our Lady Russell in the book. They obviously didn't read it, did they? So, and then you go on. Sorry, I'm just going to just say, I know about bringing something to the modern audience, and they put in things that are to the modern understanding. But if someone is going to Bath, and then your sister says, you know what, a 5 in London is a 10 in Bath, but hey, Anne, you'd be a 6. What the hey?
So okay, it sounds like you're saying that essentially, did they add things that weren't in the book?
Absolutely. And they basically lost the whole theme. The whole point of the book is Anne Elliot is now at the age of in her late 20s. She's 27, but in Jane Austen's times, that's basically, 47.
Yeah.
When she was young and in the bloom of her youth, she fell in love with a young naval officer, Captain Wentworth. He wasn't a captain then, he was just a rating in the Navy. And she was persuaded by Lady Russell, who basically, when her mother died, Lady Russell became like the feminine influence in her life because her father was like vain and a little bit of a spendthrift.
Yeah.
So Lady Russell was brought in basically to look after the three daughters of this family. And Anne is the middle child. She was the sensible one. The youngest daughter got married. The oldest daughter is very vain, but very beautiful. So she felt that whoever came near her, they weren't quite good enough for her. So she's still single. But Anne, she fell deeply in love when she was a younger girl. And she was persuaded that because of his lack of money and basically his lack of prospects, being just a rating in the Navy, that it wouldn't be the wisest choice to marry her. And she listened to this sound advice and so did not marry Captain Wentworth. And now 9 years later, he has been very successful in the Napoleonic Wars. He's taken many prizes. So his personal wealth has grown. And therefore his personal eligibility has grown. So from being a poor prospect, he's suddenly become a very attractive prospect. And Anne comes to the realization that when she was persuaded to say no to Captain Wentworth, that it wasn't the best choice. The fact she loved him, but she was persuaded against her better judgment to turn him down. And she has lived with that, and it's been her regret, but she has lived with it. And so she's taken on the role of looking after her sister's children, supporting her father, basically being the steady influence in all their lives.
Yeah.
And when Captain Wentworth comes back, because there's a sort of, don't want to go into the story, she's then they're then brought into the same circle again, and they almost like circle each other, where they're both aware of each other, and he's restrained by the fact that he was turned down, and she's restrained by the fact that she turned him down, and it takes a whole novel and all these things.
Jane Austen type things happen.
Yeah, and then there's the most perfect scene at the end, which is probably one of the most scenes in English literature, where he writes her a letter, and it's all these things just come together beautifully. But there are themes of melancholy, of regret, it's just like if you have a color for a novel, and you say like Pride and Prejudice is yellow, it's like sunny, and and you've got like Emma is like a springtime novel. You would say Persuasion is like an autumnal novel. It's like oranges and browns. It's got a certain tone to it. This is not a frivolous young woman. This is someone who has lived with their choices, and then they just accepted that they may never marry, and like Jane Austen, and they may live to be dependent upon their relation.
Because it was her final finished book, wasn't it?
Yes, her final work.
So
that was finished. She's got other fragments.
A lot of what I've seen is people saying that it's widely regarded as her best book, because I think it's probably her most mature book.
Absolutely, it's my favourite work, hands down, of all of her novels, and because it has this tone.
Yeah, and it sounds a little bit that, if I may go, because we just been talking about The Boys, it sounds a little bit like they gave the people who ran The Boys Jane Austen's novel and said, make a boys' version of a Jane Austen novel. Yeah,
I mean, some of the characters are just they're just clueless, and there's scenes in it that are utterly pointless. I mean, they introduce like the sort of they're not really an anti-hero, almost like their cousin, played by Henry Fielding, who is just like smirky and creepy. He is not, and again, the character is supposed to be charming, and you almost think when you first meet him, oh, he actually could be Anne's, answered her problems.
Yeah.
And then in this book, no, he's just like creepy. And Captain Wentworth is just dull. Anne is self-pitying and borderline alcoholic with a rabbit obsession. None of the other characters have got any. Lady Russell is I can't see how anyone who could have read that novel could make that film. I can't connect these two things. How can you have read that and be moved by that enough to want to adapt it to film and then put that drivel onto it? And they had no sense of place or time. The clothes, an absolute mess. They had garments that were from the 20s, and they had them from mid-century. They were like all over the place.
Yeah, no, okay,
Hair all over the place. Makeup wrong.
Now that's something I actually wanted, because I saw the poster for this, and I saw a still when they first announced this, and they said Persuasion, based on a Jane Austen novel, and it was going to star Dakota Johnson. And first of all, I mean, the casting of Dakota Johnson gives me the willies, because I'm like, this sounds like American trying to do an English accent car crash. And because I have to admit, I do have, it's a prejudice. I guess it's a prejudice. When you have an American playing an ostensibly English character, I'm like, oh, I don't know about this. And then I saw the clothes that she was wearing, and I was like, really? Are you sure this is Jane Austen? Because it looked, the clothes, even from the still that I saw, even for a post, I thought, that looks way too modern to be a Jane Austen period piece.
The cut, the line,
just from the picture and everything, like it looked wrong to me.
Yeah,
without
none
trying
of the
to
clothes
set it somewhere in a different time period, so it wasn't a sort of let's shift it to the 1920s.
So they haven't shifted it to a different time period. It's supposed to be the
no,
same
it's
time
absolutely
period.
is set in 1814. It's supposed to be in the height of the Napoleonic Wars. That's why he's get his fortune by taking prizes during the Napoleonic Wars. So it's clear, it's absolutely set then, and he is, wearing not even wearing the right naval uniform. But none of her clothes were right at all. The line, and in each scene, you could probably pick clothes from a different decade. I mean, it's all very well because you can pick clothes from like before then, because people didn't change their clothes every year. Fashions may change, but unless you're at the height of fashion, you may say that, okay, this year the sleeves are like this, or this year the neckline is like this. So unless you know your Regency fashion, you weren't going to pick up on that. And often people, they keep garments that are older and they rework them. So older garments, fine, you can work that in. But cut and material and style that was like 20th century, no, it's just not Regency. And some of the hair was modern. It had women never wore their hair down in public. You just didn't wear it down in public.
Yeah. It seemed like they were trying to do something weird with it that I wasn't sure.
Yeah, and just things like some of the social manners, like Anne, the way she behaves, it's just not Anne. I mean, there's one scene where she's meeting the Dalrymples, which are they're very posh, titled relations, and they're in this sort of drawing room where everything is like very stuffy, and she just says this most ridiculous joke about an octopus. When you sort of watch something, you go, what have I just watched?
This is really, really weird. Because if you're going to adapt Jane Austen, I would imagine you wouldn't be walking around like trying really hard to add dialogue. I mean, the dialogue is there. It's written for you.
Yeah. Every now and then you'd get like the beginning of a sentence is from Jane Austen, and then they suddenly veer off, and so it'd be starting off like the first 3 lines would be like, oh, they're going to be saying something from the book, and then they just go and say something really stupid. I literally could not get my head around this film. I just thought, who is this for? Is this for like the Bridgerton generation? But bearing in mind the Bridgerton books were bestsellers of like the late 1990s, early noughties, and they're like fun and frivolous, but and they have sort of stepped to the core of them. But they haven't done that with this particular book. They haven't sexed it up so they haven't made it like an amorous version of Persuasion. So they haven't, but they've just what are they trying to do? Are they trying to say to people, look, this is a great work, go read Persuasion? Because anyone who saw that and think that is a version of Persuasion are going to be shocked their back teeth when they actually read the book. Because they're just.
I understand why you changed Austen's writing in her dialogue, because it's so sharp.
Yeah, and
so precise.
Yeah, she doesn't mess around. It's quite a little tidy little book. It's not a great. It's not like War and Peace. I mean, you can.
God.
Even my hardback version is only like 200 pages long. It's not a great chunk of a book. So what you got in there is not wasted. So why? I really want to swear now.
If you're going to,
heaven forfend that I do.
Yes, yeah, so I think one of the great achievements of this film is getting Sharon to the point where she would even admit to really wanting to swear. Because Sharon, oh my word! I mean, your face at the moment, it's kind of like, when you watch a film, you watch a scene in the film, and there's somebody, and they're just about to like do the big power move, and then all of a sudden wind comes out of nowhere, and then things start racing, and then they start levitating off the ground because they're just so filled with rage. That is the picture of Sharon right now.
And I'm a bit hot as well. Like, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. But I don't.
Especially because of the zoom screen, because you're at the bottom of the zoom screen. Every time you move, it looks as if you're just sort of like rising up, like, oh, I'm gonna find the people who made this film. Because
it's been a couple of days since I've seen it. Sorry, Holly.
I was saying I can swear at them for you if that helps.
Yeah, the closest I could get to is, why would you jigger it up?
Well, but this does sound extremely. It sounds extremely weird. It sounds extremely weird. This sounds to me like somebody got the rights to Persuasion, and they love Persuasion, and this is me creating a whole narrative. And they've been trying for ages to get the film made. And when someone finally says, "Oh, we'll give you some money to make it," then you're like, "Yes, cool, let's make this film." And so they go hire a director who's never read the book. They go hire a whole bunch of people to put them together. And then they just keep making concessions because they just want to get the film made. And by the time the film is made, you're like, this looks nothing like what I envisioned. But because
they do the whole Fleabag thing where she talks to the camera. She looks and she smirks at the camera, and you get the whole Fleabag thing where suddenly, she's talking straight at you through the screen.
It worked really well, but
the thing is, I can imagine that working with Jane Austen in some adaptations of Jane Austen. I can imagine that working, but it sounds like you would need to have. It's a bit like Baz Luhrmann doing Romeo and Juliet, but doing like the old school language, but everything is all modern and stuff. But that was well thought out, and it was actually thought. And if you followed things through,
you could do it with Emma. Certainly, I think, and you could almost probably do it with Northanger Abbey, which I think would probably work, because that's sort of like there's sort of an irony to those, sort of self-awareness.
I dislike Emma, so I hope they don't, because I don't want to have to watch another Emma film, except for Clueless, which I do like, which is weird, because, I dislike Emma with a passion.
Okay, so we're getting to the point where I have to ask the fateful question of how many stars would you give this? But before you say that, I have to say that reading your Facebook posts about this film have been a delight. I'm sorry that it's a pain for you, but it has been an absolute delight for me. And it's so I'm going to go through and just sort of say some of the things that Sharon has said about this. So it starts off with your post saying, "Okay, I'm going in. My expectations based on the poster alone couldn't be any lower, but here's hoping. This is my favorite Jane Austen book." So it's almost kind of like there's a very thinly veiled, don't mess it up. And then afterwards you go, ah! As low as my expectations were, they weren't low enough. Unbelievable. Quite honestly, the worst adaptation of any book I've ever seen. What the bloody hell have I just watched? and then you go onto a WhatsApp group and go, Persuasion on Netflix. Whatever the bloody hell is I've just watched, it wasn't Jane Austen. And you talk about the fact about the 1.5. So I know, and Holly even went and found a review by somebody on, I think he has like a Substack. Yeah,
I didn't find it. It was just brought to me courtesy of Twitter. So it was like fate.
Yes,
a
guy.
Aaron.
He just is Brandon Taylor. He's an author of a book called Real Life of Filthy Animals, and his article is just entitled "Persuasion is a Hate Crime," and I think you found a kindred spirit with Brandon Taylor where you said that. But fateful word has arrived. Sharon, how many stars would you give this?
It's not an option.
I say we can't give it no stars. I would have to just say, I'd give it a 1 for the rabbit, which I was almost convinced was real. I think for its lack of acting ability, I think I'd even probably take points off of that. So I think the rabbit will give me will give it 1 star. Everyone else in that production.
0.1 stars with 0.1 for the rabbit.
Yeah, the rabbit I get a nod for the rabbit because it was
Sharon, I think you've convinced me. You've convinced me to actually just bring in 0 stars.
Hey, I needed 0 stars last week.
Yes, because you had your thing with Aftermath. The review of Holly's review of Aftermath is going up online on YouTube tomorrow. If you want to have a go have a look at that and see how enriched Holly was by the experience of watching that film. But
Film should have had 0 stars, but it wasn't an option for me.
Okay, so yeah, but you see, Sharon, this is how deep it goes with Holly. You have to see, like, look at Sharon, look at her, look at the woman.
I can.
Something that's almost sacred to her has been desecrated.
Part of me, when I watched it, I've almost blurred out some of it. I mean, I've almost tried to blank some of it out, so that part of me thinking, was it really as bad as I thought it was? And I'm like, it absolutely was. Because, I didn't really like the Pride and Prejudice version with Keira Knightley and Matthew McFadden in it.
Yeah.
And I actually ended up watching that 3 times, only because I watched it and hated it. And then I convinced myself that maybe it couldn't have been that bad, that I had was prejudiced. So I thought, it can't be that bad. So I actually watched it again. I thought, this actually sucks. And then I actually watched it a 3rd time, because again, I'd convinced myself after about a year, thinking, maybe I was just a bit hasty. Maybe it couldn't really be that bad.
Maybe
and then
just the
I still
Colin Firth
hated it.
love.
And so part of me is thinking, I never want to watch this again. I don't care if people then say it's actually a work of hidden genius and it's just one of those hidden gems in 10 years' time. I never want to see this again.
Okay.
I never want to have it mentioned in my presence ever again.
Okay.